Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. So let's get started. So how many of you attended the keynote session today? Awesome. A lot of great announcements today, especially in the data analytics space. This session is going to focus on two key announcements, which is BI Engine and connected sheets. So we're going to go deeper into why we built BI Engine, what is the value proposition, what does connected sheets offer, and we'll have a customer, AirAsia Chief Product Officer Nikunj, who is going to show a demonstration of how BI Engine and connected sheets has helped AirAsia become a data-focused organization. So let's get started. So if you look at BI today, business intelligence today, it's still a critical workload for a lot of organizations. A lot of key day-to-day decisions depend on access to business intelligence tools, but yet IT makes it's harder for IT to manage and scale business intelligence infrastructure. There are a lot of vendor solutions, and every department has their own solutions to do this, and it makes it very hard for them to scale, make sure all the data is available on time to do that. And this statistic shows that about 24% back in 2009 had access to BI tools within the organization. And since then, it has grown to about 35% with self-service BI, but still there is a gap. And we've heard this from customers of BigQuery today. A lot of customers who use BigQuery today still have to take the data out of BigQuery, create a data mart, run extracts, or manage a BI server to do their reporting and dashboarding. The second thing is customers want us to have fast interactive experience for their dashboards, sub-second query latencies, so they can visually interact with the data, make decisions. At the same time, they also want access to fresh data. So they don't want to compromise between data freshness and speed. They want to have access to real-time data so that decisions can be made on time. And lastly, customers want to expose those data sets, their key metrics, to broader set of users within the organization. So BI is more available to more users so they can get access to data sets. So how many of you use sheets today or some sort of spreadsheets? So this recent study done by the Sheets team shows that Sheets is still a top dog within an enterprise. A lot of users use Sheets as a way to do lightweight business intelligence analysis, and lightweight data wrangling. And really the opportunity we have in front of us is to really fill this gap. So BI becomes a lot more pervasive within the organization. A lot more users have access to BI tools as opposed to getting restricted to some sort of few users within the organization. So this is built on what Google believes in. Google believes in organizing world's information and making it accessible. And we believe that we want to have the same experience with business intelligence. We want to offer the first-party experience with Data Studio and Sheets, at the same time support partner solutions like Tableau, Looker, so customers have the choice which they can use for business intelligence. We want to enable BI on big data so that customers can explore big data sets, but without compromising on scale or speed. Collaboration is a big part of what we do with business intelligence. We want to make sure customers can share the data sets securely within the organization with their partners, with their vendors, without having to worry about security challenges. And lastly, this notion of blending in AI and machine learning into BI so that you can do predictive analytics is key. I was talking to a recent CIO who didn't have a good handle on the BI infrastructure, but he said, if I put ML, everything will become easy. I can do predictions, but that's not true. Because you need to have a solid foundation of business intelligence from a data management perspective. Otherwise, you're going to make a lot of bad decisions, but you will be doing it with more confidence, right? So you want to make sure that BI is the foundation layer on which you can layer machine learning and AI. And this is, if you look at our reference architecture with GCP, we have simplified solutions across all different phases of BI, right from ingestion, whether you're ingesting from on-prem sources or cloud sources. We have different set of products which allows you to do different ingestion experience. For example, we have data flow, we have cloud data fusion, which we announced today, which is about ETL. We have BigQuery transfer service for SaaS connectors. We have data proc, and we have a bunch of partner solutions as well. All the data goes into BigQuery, which is our petabyte scale data warehouse, on which we have data catalog for metadata service, and we have data prep for data wrangling. From there, you can query the data set using BigQuery SQL interface, or use Data Studio, Sheets, and also partner solutions like Tableau, Looker, et cetera. Right? But our goal is to make business intelligence infrastructure management easy, so that it's invisible, so you can focus a lot more on asking questions, interacting with your data set in a much more faster manner. So today we announced BigQuery BI Engine. And BigQuery BI Engine is really helping users to have the scale which they expect in a BI scenario. So in this, the key goal with BigQuery BI Engine is to democratize BI so that your data analyst and business analyst can do real-time interactive analytics at scale without having to compromise on data freshness or speed, right? So BigQuery BI Engine is an in-memory engine, an in-memory analysis engine which is built into BigQuery, right? So that allows you to do sub-second query responses for some of your business intelligence queries at high concurrency, right? So some of the key aspects of BigQuery BI Engine is that sub-second queries, it simplifies the architecture. Now you don't have to move data outside of BigQuery to any of your data marts or run complex extracts. It's built into BigQuery. And lastly, it has some query optimizations done for some of the BI use cases so that your queries are really optimized as you start scaling your dashboards. So let's go into each of them individually. So sub-second queries. So BI Engine is a column-oriented in-memory analysis engine built into BigQuery. BigQuery is a column-oriented data store, and BI Engine is a column-oriented in-memory engine. It can scale horizontally, so as more users access your dashboards and reports, it can replicate data horizontally to multiple nodes, so it can support all your concurrent queries much more faster. And the last one is an important one. BigQuery BI Engine natively integrates with BigQuery streaming, so as data gets streamed into your infrastructure, into your BigQuery table, it can do aggregation right on the streaming buffer, so your total latency from the event coming into BigQuery versus showing up in your dashboard is in seconds, not minutes or hours, right? So that sort of makes the whole real-time experience for dashboards much more faster. Second one is it's built on BigQuery Storage, and because of which it eliminates the need for managing any BI servers or running extracts or running a data mart. It automatically decides what kind of data sets to be used, and it automatically loads it into an in-memory OLAP cube. So you don't have to really create any OLAP engine or manage that. We sort of create a supercharged OLAP cube on the fly and then expose that to your dashboards. And our key goal here is also to be open to partners. So we'll have an open API, which is a simple SQL interface, so that tools like Looker and Tableau or any of the open source tools can connect to BI Engine through SQL interface and still get the same experience. The last one is smart tuning. So BI Engine has a query optimizer built in, which looks at your BI specific query and optimizes that. For example, it uses the right sort of encoding. It understands what sort of queries you're using, so it can do compression, or it may not do compression based on your group by or other clauses. And lastly, all of this capacity management for BI Engine is built into BigQuery UI starting today. So if you go to your BigQuery UI, you will see a new option called BI Engine, where you can decide how much capacity you need for your BI use cases. So it automatically takes all those columns which you create from Data Studio, loads it into memory, and any of the data queries which come from Data Studio is served from the BI Engine. We don't use BigQuery slots. So you sort of make good trade-off between what kind of concurrency or query latency you need versus how many slots you want to use. So you can make this seamless trade-off based on your use case. And it's as simple as going and deciding how much capacity you need for the project. And then it automatically does that for you. And all these metrics about how much data is coming from BigQuery OLAP cubes is all surfaced in Stackdriver. So you can see what is the query and latency. You can decide how much of it is coming from the in-memory engine versus slots. So you can decide how much capacity you want to add more versus reduce. So just look at a quick look at BigQuery architecture. This is the BigQuery architecture today, which we have shared it with you for over the years. It's really what makes BigQuery a petabyte scale data warehouse is the separation of storage and compute with a petabit network, which makes what BigQuery is. But what we're adding today with BI Engine is a stateful execution layer on top of the same BigQuery storage. The stateful execution layer actually maintains the state of all your data sets, so that when you access that from a dashboard tool like Data Studio or Sheets, it can do the smart optimization in memory versus going back to BigQuery storage. And it can automatically maintain this adaptive cache between the storage layer and the in-memory layer. So let's go one level deeper and see how it works. So behind BI Engine, there is a semantic model. So we create a semantic model comprising of your metadata, It has a calculation API, which Data Studio uses today, and it maintains all that semantic model in memory. And when the query comes, the intelligent memory manager looks at the query and looks at what optimizations can be done. And if it can be done within the in-memory layer, it actually does all those optimizations, like picking the right encoding, picking the right compression format, and serves that from the query. And it cannot, if it doesn't do that, it automatically fails over to slots, right? So it automatically decides what kind of optimization can be done. It'll do it. If not, it'll use slots. And that's what makes the initial sort of small queries much more faster. When I'm talking about like millisecond latencies, what you get from this engine. So how is the pricing for this? The pricing is very similar to how BigQuery is priced today. There's an on-demand tier and there's a flat tier. So for on-demand, it starts at 1 gig, and you can add in increments of 1 gig capacity. And it's about 0.0416 GB per hour, or it roughly translates to $30.36 per gig per month, right? And as I said earlier, whenever any query comes from the BI engine capacity, we don't use slots. So you're not paying for the per query cost, which you see in BigQuery. So you make those trade-offs based on your use case. And if you're a flat rate customer, we pre-bundle the BI engine capacity for every tier. So if you're a 500 slot customer, we give you 25 gigs of capacity. If you're a 2,000 slot tier, we give you 100 gigs of capacity. And if you want anything more, you can pay based on the per gig cost, which is on the left side. So today in beta, we are not enabling billing. So you can experience BI engine for your use case up to 10 gigs. You can try it out, see how it works for your use case. But once we start enabling billing sometime in July, we will increase the capacity so you can get bigger capacity sizes as well. So we've been using BI engine for working with customers for last few months, and we've got some great feedback, and it has helped us improve this whole engine as well. So Vendesta is a customer I met at Next last year. We're doing a session on showing the billing dashboards in Data Studio, and it was a little slower to load. So we worked with them and got them onto the BI engine alpha program. They worked with us, and since then, it has dramatically changed the way the dashboard latencies are, right? From minutes to it has come down to like literally seconds. And they're slowly going to roll out this to their internal users and as well as to their end customers. So we've seen that success with Zalando as well. So Zalando is a e-commerce leader in Europe. So they had this internal supply chain dashboard which all of their suppliers use to look at their use cases, how much goods are being sold on their website, what channels are effective. And they wanted that very interactive experience for their business stakeholders and product managers to make those decisions. By using the BI engine, they were able to get to that level of query latencies, and they're able to roll it out to a set of users. And today they have about 800 users within the organization using Data Studio, and they're going to expand that to a lot more users. Again, going back to democratizing BI and making it accessible to a lot more users. Last one is a Fortune 500 media company, and they sort of create a news data warehouse for their journalists and editors. So they can look at what channels are being used and what is the more effective way to market their news pieces. So they provided a dashboard on Data Studio to their internal users running on BI engine, and they were able to get a lot more faster experience for their users. So with that, I also want to introduce the next piece of democratizing BI is connected sheets. So connected sheets is where you use sheets as an interface, but it's backed by BigQuery, right? So it maintains a live connection with BigQuery. So without any knowledge of SQL, with minimum knowledge of SQL, you can just drag and drop, create pivot tables, do filtering, apply formulas with just a few clicks. And because of the whole G Suite experience of sharing and collaboration experience, you can share securely your sheets with a lot more users within the organization, so that way you don't have to worry about exporting data to a sheet and giving it to different people over emails. You can do that securely, but since it's backed by BigQuery, it can do analysis on a large data set, which was not possible earlier, right? So we're super excited about connected sheets. Again, we'll have beta sometime in end of 2019, and at that point, connected sheet will also use BigQuery BI Engine as their underlying engine. So you get the same experience of sub-second query latency on a big data set with an interactive experience, so that you can roll out your BI use cases to a lot more users within the organization. So with that, let me introduce Nikunj. Nikunj is the Chief Product Officer of AirAsia, and they've been a great advocate of BigQuery, and they've been using all our early versions of product and given us great feedback. So with that, let me hand it off to him to showcase how BI Engine and connected sheets has impacted his organization.
Okay, great. All right, so a little bit of background. AirAsia is a low-cost airline based in Southeast Asia. We're in our transformation program. We're working on AirAsia 3.0, which is really about taking the airline to the next level, which is more than beyond flights. It's really about selling customers other things that they might need in their journey, such as hotels, activities, and other complementary things that go beyond the flight. And to do that, we have to really become a digital airline, really leverage the data that we have. Over the history of AirAsia, we've flown over 500 million passengers, and we want to start going on to the next experience of personalizing their experiences from booking and ticketing. And then the second thing is really, in the airline world, you still see a lot of paper being used, and it's about digitizing that paper so we can do a lot more data flows across the board and complete the data loop. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on, but the whole goal is to get AirAsia to AirAsia 3.0, which is really around going beyond flights and selling other opportunities. And so just a little bit of background on AirAsia. We're a very, very large airline group in Southeast Asia, number 4 by numbers in Asia, 260 aircraft, 360 routes, 190 unique destinations. So unique means that we're the only ones flying that route, which gives us a great view on where customers want to go. 140 destinations in 24 countries. We fly around 90 million passengers, so as you can imagine, that's a lot of personal information, but also a lot of information about customers that don't actually book and transact with us, but we have a lot of detailed information there. And through the lifetime, we have 500 million customers, and our staff is quite intensive as well. We have 24,000 staff, which we call All-Stars. And so as AirAsia is going to the next trajectory, we're transforming from an airline company to a digital company, and technology and data is quite important for that. We're trying to build a brand that will go beyond ASEAN, and we have a 5-year plan for AirAsia 3.0, which is really to go beyond flights. And then we want to be leading the pack on innovation and pioneering. So we're really using data as a key lever to be able to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more on how that works within AirAsia. So in terms of data, we've been collecting data for a long time. There's so many places that you can collect information. You can kind of see how that is listed out here. There's always emails, loyalty programs, the actual ticketing booking, profiles of customers for what they like, what they don't like. Do they like to buy a seat? We sell a la carte seats, meals, bags, so we have a lot of preferential data on what customers like. And based on the routes, we see a lot of different behaviors that are happening, and we want to be able to use that data to help personalize what's going on. We have social media activity. With the invent of mobile, we have a lot more on location tracking and how people are using. And as you can imagine, people that book on mobile have a different profile than people that book on desktop. So we're taking advantage of all that data. We spent a lot of time for the last 3 years really normalizing and putting all that data into BigQuery to be able to build that foundation so that we can make really good use cases come out of it. And some of those are really turning out new, and I'll talk about a couple of them that the team are working on that really help for our operations as well. So there's a couple folks working on a couple of use cases around meal planning and things like that. And then all of this really, our end goal is really to collect information throughout the whole journey as much as possible. We're very guest obsessed. We want to really drive our guest experience higher, and our goal is to have a really high NPS score, and we're using all these different touch points, really completing the data loop. As you can imagine, many airlines just focus on one part or another part. We want to really focus on the end-to-end journey and really capture all feedback and experience that happens when people are just doing discovery, which is before search, but also when they come to the website, what are they searching for? How many times are they searching? How do we make this a little bit better and faster? How do we market the right information to customers? So we really need a really solid foundation to be able to collect that data, and BigQuery has really provided us that foundation, and based on that, we're able to customize and do a little bit more beyond on the search side, but also on the operations side that we're working on there. And then from the data management to data-driven outcomes, right? So we have a lot of data that comes in. We have descriptive analytics, which are really around business intelligence and reporting, which is standard what most companies have, and we're making that a lot easier and trying to democratize that data. So I'll show you some of the examples that we have with Data Studio and Sheets, connected Sheets, how that works. We have some other situations on the left on diagnostic analytics, which is really around how to improve the operations or how to sell more. We're working on what might happen, which is around do we put extra meals on a plane or do we keep them out there? Because every time we put an extra meal, we think we might be able to sell more by just doing more announcements and et cetera, but that's not always the case. And can we use ML to really optimize our wastage on the plane? So we have some really good examples and use cases beyond that. And then what's the next best action? So depending on your demographic and your profile, if you're flying a short haul flight that's only less than 75 minutes, would you really want to buy a meal, or would you be more interested in boarding and leaving the plane first? And so based on that information, we can make different techniques and status based on your preferences, and also show different results to user on the website. So we've incorporated all those type of techniques onto the website. So if you do use AirAsia.com, you'll see many of those things. And if you're on a plane and that's being leveraging a ML model for food, you'll see that the food wastage is very low on that plane, because we're able to ensure that we don't have extra weight because of the food, but we're not losing money because of the wastage there. So that's all being taken care of. So we're really using our data and trying to drive outcomes that come out of it. Okay, and so the key things that happen on the AirAsia transformation is really, we want to, like I mentioned before, the airline has a lot of paper processes, so we need to go ahead and digitize that information. Once we start digitizing the information, we can start to see patterns, right? And we can really start making minor adjustments to it, and so to be able to go optimize that stuff. So as part of that transformation, we've gone through organizational changes to enable that process. We've started to move a lot of our data to the cloud. Once the data is in the cloud, we can do a couple automations to really check on our hypothesis and see if that's really happening. We move to an agile structure so that commercial teams and marketing teams and technology teams are really moving quicker and being able to produce outcomes, and really, instead of taking months to do something, we can do something in weeks to see if our hypotheses are working correctly. And then we do it again, so it's a full circle process. So if we find something else, we continue the process there. And why did we choose Google, a cloud platform? Well, back when we started the journey, BigQuery was the leader in the space back then, and still is the leader now in terms of processing data at subsection queries. Actually getting information into BigQuery is very straightforward, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And cost, as a low-cost airline, cost is quite important for us, and being able to decouple query and storage is quite important. And then the no-ops model of BigQuery is great, so that our developers can go ahead and develop infrastructure or data sets, but also ETL processes, so they don't have to worry about an infrastructure guy spinning up a new database. That's not a problem. And then being able to do many queries in background, so they're not waiting for whose priority of the query goes first, right? That's not a problem anymore. That was a problem that we had before. And so all of that is solved by the Google platform. But as we develop more and more things on Google, all the data sits in one place, and then we're able to combine it in BigQuery to be able to do a lot more use cases, right? And so our solution architecture here is built this way, and I'll walk you through a little bit more so you understand how it works. We have a RDMS. I think most customers have RDMSs out there. Our RDMS is a very old Windows technology RDMS, I'll say, and we need to get the data out of there. And so we have some connectors with the ETL over here in the middle. We use Composer in that scenario to get data out of there, and we load it into BigQuery. We have flat files that come out for many of the third-party data that we have when we're doing pricing comparisons. We use third-party acquisition sources, and we get some data from there. Again, that goes through a pub sub so that we can automatically load it into BigQuery via a notification. We have data from Firestore for our NoSQL data, and that goes through Cloud Functions whenever updates happen. So that goes into BigQuery, and any other data that's automatically produced from GCP, so our App Engine logs and other things around there, we can go ahead and naturally put into BigQuery, and that makes it a lot easier for us to have a centralized place. And then what we do from there is really have some processes on Cloud Functions or a Composer or other scripts that we have that really start massaging that data into data marts that we need, or big data lake in BigQuery. So we can start looking at individual profiles, so we can look at an individual user and see their history and pattern if you've logged in to understand what we need to personalize. Or we go ahead and do attribute scoring that we need to do to provide you a route, what that route really wants. Or an example of cart loading is based on who's flying, what type of meals might be needed to sell that. All of that goes BigQuery. And for archiving purposes, we store a snapshot of every day into cloud storage. So if we want to roll back in time and see what happened, we can go back and go load up that snapshot from cloud storage, so that a lot of times things, as you can imagine, the airline is a moving state operation, and things that were the status 3 weeks ago might have not been the status of a ticket. And you don't want to you don't want to store a live repository of that. We can just go snapshot in time and see what that ticket state was a couple of weeks before and see what's happening there. Now, all of that actually goes into our delivery and digestion insights delivery. We have two primary tools, Data Studio and Sheets. And recently we've been able to cut down on some of the other tools that we use. Just the products have gotten so much better, and they are continually improving, and they're helping us reduce our dependency on third-party tools. So we have Data Studio and Data Sheets on that. And then out of BigQuery, we're able to do machine learning. We use some of that data, again, for personalizing experiences with App Engine. It goes into the other GCP core tools as data flow and compute engine. Data flow we kind of use really for how many people are searching for a route and et cetera, and we can do a lot of stuff with that data there that comes in real time. So that's kind of how it works there. And then we'll go into a demo, and I'll show you some of the two products that we use and how they're used in real life. So one of the dashboards that our marketeers use quite a lot is what the nationality flown dashboard. I think we saw a demo of that. The data itself has been changed a little bit. So for anyone that wants to know, we've changed all the airports out. So what you're seeing is, and some of the metrics out, we've changed some of that out. So it's not real AirAsia. It's AirAsia data, but the names are US names. So it's very easy. So if you know airport codes, you'll probably see very familiar names here. But this dashboard is really used by marketeers to go ahead and know what type of people are flying on a flight, what is happening in terms of a number of passengers flown. And typically, they were getting this dashboard via email once a month. And now when we moved it over to the BigQuery engine and the pipelines that we have, we're able to go ahead and distribute this daily. And customers or our end clients can go ahead and drill down and use it. So I'll go do an example here. We have the date range. But if I was interested in, let's go ahead and say MY nationality, I can just click on that. It's using the BI engine in the background and filters everything pretty quickly. And if I was interested in this Fort Lauderdale route, I can go ahead and click on that. And it sub-seconds goes ahead and changes the data across, which is fantastic, because when you're in a meeting, you can refer to this dashboard as the Bible, and everyone's looking at the same thing. So you can get up to many users on it. This is a copy of the real one. So obviously, there's only one person on it right now. But when we're in meetings, you can get up to like a lot of people on it. We have around 1,000 to folks in marketing and commercial. So you can imagine we can get about 200 people looking at this on a daily basis. Not all concurrently, but concurrently I usually see around 50 to 60 people using. And now with BI Engine, the way that it works, it really makes it easy and fast for people to go ask that question and leave the meeting with real concrete action items versus actually waiting for a report back and asking a question and then having another meeting on the report. So it works quite well. Let me just reset everything. And you can see here, as I filter along, it's pretty responsive and fast on how it works. So it's quite impressive for us. But a lot of times, the pre-cam dashboards that we have aren't enough for our marketeers. They want to ask more questions, right? So, and the ultimate tool that they use still is a spreadsheet, right? Because they want to see some underlying data and they want to do a couple more things. So what happens is our BI teams, they usually get tasked with data pukes, right? And data puke is really an extraction of information because it's really hard for them to go write a SQL query to get this information. With the the upcoming release of Connected Sheets, we can go ahead and provide a lot more self-service. So this is a demo sheet that we put together. We'll look at some of the questions that we have here. And some of the questions is, it's great, the dashboard looks great, but we need something more on capacity and packs flown. So I'll show you an example of that. In the dashboard, it doesn't have that very easily for someone to see. It's there, but it's not 100% exactly in the form that they want. And they'll ask some particular questions. So I'll just go through an example of what they do. There, the data that we're going to use is, we're going to use this data set here. So let me just go to the live one. And you can see it's around 12 million rows. We have a lot of data sets that are about 100 million rows as well. And then you can imagine a marketeer will have a tough time taking this and putting this into a spreadsheet. It's just too heavy for a spreadsheet to use. So how do we solve that with Connected Sheets? I'll try a brand new one. So I'll just show you the process. So if you go to Data, Data Connectors, Connected Sheet here. Let's see if it is fast enough. There's a lot of people on Wi-Fi here, so it's a little slow, but we'll go to our demo data set. And so it's as you can tell, it's going straight against BigQuery here and going against that. And it actually pulls the data here. This is great. This is the raw data. It doesn't show you all 12 million rows. It just gives you an idea of what's going on. And then we'll go ahead and do a pivot table, as most marketeers want to do. And the question that they want to know is, like, Fort Lauderdale, how has it been growing in terms of packs nationality? And we can kind of add that for the last 2 years. So we can go ahead and add some rows to show that. And what we'll do here is group it by month, add some columns, and group it by year. And we'll add in packs flown, as that was the question. And then we'll add in a filter that the text contains, and so if you know airport codes, Fort Lauderdale is FLL, I think. I'm not really in the US market, but I think that's it. And if you hit the apply button, it does some magic behind the scenes, and you get some information there, and you can see how that actually flows out. And you can ask more questions very easily here. But the magic behind this is really it did execute a query. And if we go to our query history, oops. Should I refresh? Yeah. Let me refresh. Hopefully it won't take too long. If it doesn't, I shouldn't refresh. I should have tabbed it. But you can see here it did the query that's here. And then if previously this type of analysis and work would have required a data analyst to go ahead and write this query for the marketing guy, and that causes a delay, and then you have to go ahead and prioritize some effort here. But now with this type of work, you're able to execute the query on the fly in a connected sheet so that they can get this type of information very fast and easy, and they can continue on with their questions without interrupting the more complex work that a BI analyst might need to go do. So this is the next evolution of data analysis at AirAsia, and we'll be able to do a lot more democratization of the data that we've already flattened and built in BigQuery. So that's the end of the demo. Oh, do I have one? Yeah. Is it there? Oh, sorry. OK, so and then what this really means in terms of the impact is we can use the data in BigQuery to reduce our operating costs. And like the example I told you is really, wastage on meals. We can go ahead and solve that. 0 hours in terms of managing servers. We don't have to wait. We are actually, everything's up and running faster. Previously, in most ETL jobs, if you're in the data warehousing world, you only reprocess X amount of days in history. With the infrastructure that we have in place, I put 2 years of data, but we can go many years, and we can process that in minutes. Usually, we can do the whole ETL job very, very fast. Historically, most companies only process 7 years or 30 days or 7 days or 30 days of historical data on a run. We can go ahead and reprocess the whole cube. So that allows us to keep the raw data and then go ahead and run our ETL pipeline so that we get faster corrections or faster reports out. And then all of this can be shared and used by the 1,500 plus knowledge workers that we have. We have a lot of folks that are running the operations of the plane. They don't need really access to a lot of this raw data, but as we expose a lot more data about customer behavior, et cetera, we'll be expanding. Everyone will be able to access a lot more information, so your cabin crew that's serving your hot meal will know like your preference, whether you like a Coke or a Diet Coke. You don't have to ask that question. It'll just give you that beverage of choice that you need, because that's where people are expecting that type of behavior. If they've been ordering Coke for the last 5 years, you kind of know what they want, so we can go ahead and distribute this data a lot more around the scenes there.
Right, thanks Nikunj.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So what you just saw was how AirAsia was able to use the capability of connected sheets with BI Engine and scale BI to a lot more users within the organization. So just to wrap it up, I just want to provide a quick roadmap update on where things are. So today we are announcing beta with Data Studio for BI Engine. The reservations that we're not turning on billing, so you can use up to 10 gigs. But sometime in July, we will turn on billing, where we give you more capacity, so you can decide, you can create bigger data models. And GA is around Q4, where we'll integrate BI Engine with connected sheets as well, so you get the same sort of fast performance, share the data model within Studio and Sheets. But as I said earlier, we take a very partner-oriented approach in this as well. So there will be an open API, which will be a simple SQL interface, and we're working with Tableau and Looker and other BI vendors to integrate this BI Engine with other front ends as well. So that's absolutely in the roadmap, and that will be available sometime early Q1, maybe Q4 as well. So call to action, try BI Engine. It's available for you starting today. You will see that in the BigQuery UI. You can use Data Studio to connect to that. There's also a session, I think right after this, which talks about all the new features of Data Studio, how Data Studio is evolving as a visualization solution, a lot of new features as well. So I encourage you to attend that. We did have a session earlier today on Sheets, all the different ways Sheets can be used. So we have recorded that, so do watch it. And also when you're in Asia, fly AirAsia. Thank you all. Have a great session.